Hello! Today's stories come from r/Am I the Butthole? We've got 4 stories, so let's get straight to it. First up, am I the butthole for sitting on a man's hand after he refused to remove it from the empty seat? Pretty sure I was a butthole here, but we'll see. So I, a 30-year-old female, am 8 months pregnant. I take public transport to work daily. I'm always exhausted because I have to work extra time to be able to afford basic necessities. I take the bus to work every day, and oftentimes it's packed. But I get lucky enough when decent folks volunteer their seats for me. Now, I should mention that I don't use my pregnancy as an excuse to get what I want, but people just offer me their places by themselves, which is kind and sweet. Wednesday, I get on the bus like usual, but this time there's one empty seat. I go to sit, but I find a guy in his business attire sitting there with his hand on the empty seat, sort of like resting it. I say excuse me and ask him to remove his hand so I can sit. But he tells me the seat was taken. I ask by who, and he says his hand. Not gonna lie, I laughed a little bit, but wasn't feeling well, so I asked him to remove it so I could sit, but he refuses again. Folks start staring. I tell him I'm tired and needed to sit, and he replies saying my pregnancy isn't his problem. I had enough at this point. My legs were burning and my back was hurting. So I go ahead and sit on his hand. He freaks out and tries to remove it quickly while shouting at me. He then starts arguing about how disrespectful I was to do this inappropriate thing, and in public, no less. I argue back, not gonna lie, but then he gets off after saying I was being inappropriate and disrespectful. Everyone stares at me, and I just sit there feeling a bit of shame about what happened. I tell my husband about this incident, and he, what the frack, the entire time. Then says that I did indeed act inappropriately and shouldn't have made this guy uncomfortable by sitting on his hand like that. He tells me I fracked up, and this was totally inappropriate despite me saying I was so tired of standing and was in desperate need to sit down. Am I the butthole? Edit. Several points. Like I said, I do get offered seats from others, so I'm being treated well most of the time. But unfortunately, run into some people who don't do that. This guy seemed to be upset about something, and then the argument probably made it worse. It could have de escalated by maybe talking to the driver. However, I'm pretty sure he didn't pay for the seat just to put his hand on it. Who does that? Also, most of the passengers were younger folks that day. I would get a seat from older folks. I gotta say, I don't understand the husband's position or why he would even argue with this. Definitely not the butthole. Sitting down, hand or not, is hardly the end of the world. It's not like she was trying to sit on his hand. She was trying to sit in an empty seat this guy was purposely blocking for no good reason. That guy was a jerk by taking up an extra seat for his hand. Anyone disagree? Genuinely curious to hear another side of this. Our second story is the first of a Bridezilla two-parter. Am I the butthole for not wanting to pay for professional hair, makeup, new shoes, and stay in an expensive Airbnb for my friend's out-of-town wedding? Hi, y'all. I'm a 28-year-old female, and my friend, a 30-year-old female, let's call her B, is getting married to her long-distance boyfriend of 6 months. He's 28. For background, I live in a city about a 16-hour drive away from where B lives. However, the groom also lives in a different city from both myself and the bride, somewhere in between both of us. She will be getting married on her groom's farm in a different state about 6 hours away from me. A couple of days later, all crap breaks loose when B's first list of requirements emerge in the group chat. Makeup and hair must be professionally done and paid for by the bridesmaid, $200 for both. We must purchase nude flats, and we may not wear heels, around $30 to $50. She is worried she and her groom will look shorter than us. We must wear the jewelry of her choice. To be fair to her, she said this would be a borrowed gift to us when she decides what look she's going for. Nails must be bare or in the mauve color she has selected for her dress. The dress must be from the local boutique, 16-hour drive or 3-hour plane flight away from me, and must be floor length with straps. The boutique doesn't ship, but my sister is picking it up, trying it on, and sending pics. I texted her explaining I'm traveling for the wedding and I'm happy to pay the accommodation, airfare, and for the dress, but that if she was requiring professional makeup and specific non-heeled shoes, that she would have to pay for the extra things she wants. I explained that I am happy to pay for the usual things, but that my budget wouldn't allow for professional hair and makeup, and new shoes. She said she would speak to her groom about allowing me to stay on the farm property, but that the makeup was non-negotiable. Fast forward again to today. B texts me and says she will have to renege on the offer she made to me to let me stay in the farmhouse on the night after the wedding. She reserved an Air BnB in the city, $200 a night for the wedding party. However, she says she will only be paying for the night prior to the wedding. B tells me that she thinks I should stay in the Airbnb she booked since there is a 2 night minimum and she would like the money back. I politely declined and said I would try to find accommodations in the city for the night after the wedding since there are some reasonable places to stay. I asked if there would be anyone to transport me back to the city since no cabs or public transportation will go there. B says she will not arrange transportation for me unless I stay in the $200 Airbnb and pay her back for the cost of it. She said I may bring a tent, or I have to figure it out myself. I'm more than willing to pay for the dress, transportation, etc. The cost of being in her wedding right now is $1,256, including all travel expenses, dress, and extras she's asked for. Am I the butthole? I don't think there's a lot of controversy here, or at least I hope not. Bring a tent? No, thank you. It sounds like she's being treated like a prop rather than a friend. There's an update, so let's quickly have a look at what people thought before moving on. Weed Love and Starseeds said, "Not the butthole. Are you absolutely sure even going is worth it?" OP. I'm leaning real hard towards noping right out of this whole bizarre event. Union Mom said, "Not the butthole. She's going all Bridezilla for a guy she's known for 6 months. Skip the wedding and take them out for their first anniversary. There won't be one." Guilt ridden Mama Bear replies, "Seriously, y'all, I have to go for confession this morning and I'm not sure I can do it without giggling." Singing Songbird said, "Not the butthole. As someone planning a wedding myself, I would never demand my bridesmaids spend this much on something this specific. She should be footing that bill. I wouldn't bother going to a wedding where I'd have to spend $1,300 just for the wedding." Someone said in response, "I asked my girls to buy a navy dress on Amazon for $35 and show up. They looked beautiful and I was giving them gifts. I don't understand the entitlement. I hope OP knows she's not the butthole, and I hope she doesn't waste her time and money to fulfill her friend's Instagram photo wishes." OP replied, saying, "This is super considerate. I know the dress and looking presentable is part of it, so that makes sense to me. But it seems so focused on what I look like and how much I'm spending, and not at all on just being there to support her for her big day and having a good time. I do want to see her get married, but it seems like she wants me there for the Insta and that sweet, sweet purple aesthetic." And now onto the update. Hi again. Since one user said they would summon an internet ghost to haunt me if I was a bridesmaid in this wedding, here's an unsolicited update. After taking a day or two to think it through, I texted my friend and explained to her the following, summarized. I think she's a great friend and we have a lot of great memories together. I was excited to make a new one on her big day. That being said, I couldn't afford the expenses she required, such as professional hair, makeup, specific shoes, and the chosen Airbnb. I explained that the $1,200 it would cost to attend is over my budget, and I simply could not afford the things she is asking for. I don't want to put her in a position where she would be compromising on things she wanted to accommodate my budget. So the best thing for me to do was to bow out of being a bridesmaid right now, so she can have ample time to find a replacement. I also explained that I had some concerns with how I was going to get off the farm after the night of the wedding, since she said she would only offer transport if I stayed in the shared $200 Airbnb. She was unsure who else would be staying there. I said I have to be in court for a trial 2 days after the wedding, and while I'm usually very flexible, I couldn't leave that part to chance, since my career is important to me. B responded with the following, summarized. She has been very busy planning her move, doing report cards, she is a teacher, and planning the wedding. She felt that since I am a lawyer, I should be able to afford everything she is asking for. For reference, I am a very new government lawyer and have massive student debt. She deserves a bridesmaid who will meet her expectations and be able to support her. I am not sure how to respond to her, or if I will, but I do think I dodged a bullet, or at least a trip to Crazy Town. Thank you so much to all of you who convinced me to not attend this disaster. You have saved me $1,200 and 6 months of horror. Yikes. Still, very much not the butthole. It sounds like the Bridezilla was looking for rich friends who could afford her idea of a picture-perfect wedding party just for the sake of Instagram photos. I still can't get over the suggestion of bringing a tent to a farmhouse in a rural area, no less, with no transportation options at all. I don't want to dissect it too much because there's some good discussion on this in the comments. Elf said, "You've totally dodged a bullet. The bride sounds very entitled and not at all sympathetic to your position. It's so hard to let down a friend, and congratulations for being so measured in your message to her. But I have to say, she's let you down too. Big time." In response to Bridezilla saying lawyers should be able to afford it, Berber Pat Pat said, even having the money doesn't mean spending it on her. I would think that if she has such high standards for her wedding and her bridesmaids, then she would have the money to meet those expectations. OP said, "Absolutely. I was pretty taken aback by that comment. My personal finances are so irrelevant since she isn't entitled to tell me how to spend my income." Okay, so our last story was so interesting and came with a bit of mystery. It actually comes from r/legal advice, but it did ask for a moral judgment on a course of action. So I thought it still fit well enough to make an exception for. Let's dive in. The title is Our Neighbor's Dog Was Poisoned. Police want to look through our internet history, a very nebulous term. Wife says we should let them because we have nothing to hide. I say absolutely not. How should we proceed? I guess some background is in order here. Earlier this year, a new set of neighbors moved in, and they brought with them three very loud dogs who they let bark and bay 24 hours a day. We were the first people to go talk with them, and they got better for maybe 20 minutes, and they just let the dogs back outside to continue on. Our city has a policy where noise complaints can be made to an animal control, so we did that, which did nothing. The next step was to go to a city sponsored mediation, at which point the dog's owners agreed to keep them inside. They did this for maybe 3 days, and then we were back to square one. The next step is to take them before a judge who gave them a pretty hefty fine with the admonition to take care of the problem. This all took about 10 months, with literally only a day's total of these dogs not barking. So they were quiet for about a month after the court date, but slowly and surely they started barking again, at all hours. We tried to go over and speak to them, but this time they very clearly insinuated that barking dogs were their right, and we needed to get the frack off their property. So we decided the only way was to start the process over with animal control, as well as contacting our own lawyer to see about taking them to civil court. We have yet to contact the lawyer. We had made the initial report to animal control last Thursday when we got a knock on our door, and it was a uniformed police officer who said something like, "Do you have any antifreeze?" I was really taken aback, and I think I asked, "I think so. Do you need some?" He then spoke something into the walkie talkie on his epaulet and asked if he could come in. I literally had no idea what was going on, and then he explained that one of the neighbor's dogs had been poisoned and asked if we knew them. I explained that I actually didn't know who he was talking about. The other two dogs hadn't stopped barking after the other dog died, and I really have no way of knowing which dog is which. He said it was this family and said that they had told him we had a history of being cruel to his dogs. I got out the whole file folder, including my logs talking to the neighbors, the calls to animal control, my copy of the letters, mediation agreement, and judge's order, as well as written down links to the YouTube channel we created in order to document the barking via audio. The officer then asked if he could take everything. I said I wasn't comfortable with that, but I would be happy to make copies today at work and drop them off at the local substation. I did exactly this. I was met by a uniformed supervisor who said that he would like to send a specialist over to our house and look through our internet history to see what we've been looking up. Again, I was taken completely aback and said that I'm not sure what he'd be looking for. He told me that was up to them to decide what they'd be looking for. It took me a second, but I asked him to better define specialist and internet history, and he said that at this time he couldn't do that for me. I asked him if somehow we were suspects, and he said, if I remember, not yet. I asked him if I could leave. He said yes, and again asked if his specialist could come over tonight. I said I would really rather not, but I would get back in touch with him. He gave me his card, and we said goodbye. I just got home and told my wife. My wife insists that we invite him over right now to have them look through our computer. We have nothing on there that would tie us to any sort of dog death, but I feel it's insane to just let the police look through the nebulous internet history without them being very specific as to who is doing and what they are looking for. She thinks that by not letting them, we are making ourselves look very guilty. I say we are not guilty because we aren't freaking guilty, and it's their job to find out who really did it. It sucks those people's dog died, but we have followed the letter of the law and have been exceedingly patient, even though our once quiet house has been miserable for almost a year. I'm actually really annoyed that our willingness to play by the rules seem to highlight us. Thank you very much for any advice. Update. So, thank you to everyone who responded, and I guess thank you to everyone in the DMs who accused me of torturing dogs by forcing the owners to keep them inside because, God forbid, I want to sleep in my own house. Just to allay the fears of the other nice DMs, I did not in any way, shape, or form hurt the dog. Also, a legit thank you to everyone who offered tips on anti bark devices. The problem is these people aren't next door to us, which goes to show how loud the dogs are. So we don't have the ability to set up any sort of device. I took the advice of 99.9% of the posters and did not call the officer back on Monday night. I also showed my wife this thread, and she was pretty convinced, so thank you for all the rational responses. I called a criminal defense attorney first thing yesterday morning. He was very cool and said that he didn't want to waste our time, any money, because the chances of the DA actually pursuing this were slim to none. He did tell me to not answer any more questions, and if the police did come for me again, I could refer them to him, or if God forbid they arrested me, he gave me the number of his answering service. He said that he had a good friend who worked as detective, and he'd try put a call in to figure out off the record what was really going on. So basically, nothing happened yesterday. Of course, the other dogs are still barking, even as I type this. But I just heard Wednesday morning from the attorney, and basically, he had talked to his detective friend who looked into it. Basically, regardless of what the neighbors say, there's actually zero evidence of them owning 3 dogs. In fact, the best evidence that the now dead dog ever existed were my calls to animal control, the mediation records, and the judge's ruling. The people could not provide any pictures, social media posts, any shot records, vet bills, or purchase receipts for any of the dogs, let alone one that died. They also had not done any sort of medical exam to prove the dog had been poisoned, and they immediately buried the dog in the desert when they found it dead. For all I know, they buried the dog instead of taking it to the vet. They are the trashiest people I've ever encountered. They can't even really remember where they buried it, or don't want to say. So, with almost no evidence of the dog ever existing, let alone being poisoned, we shouldn't hear from the police again. So, our complaint to animal control from last Thursday is still on the books. The lawyer is going to refer us to a civil attorney who he thinks will take our case to bring a civil suit against the dog owners. Our city and county ordinances very clearly state that dogs can't bark for more than 15 minutes a day, and you have the right to an expectation of quiet in your own home. The criminal lawyer doesn't know how successful we'll be, but he does think that maybe the threat of lawsuit will get them to address the barking problem, because it would be easier for them to just bring the dogs inside as opposed to a court case, which they stand a chance of losing. Okay, so who thinks the third dog ever existed? Option A, was it just some scheme to get back at the people who are complaining about you and causing you problems? Or there was a third dog. Option B, was the death negligence by the owners? Or option C, a third neighbor who's been silently losing their minds over the incessant barking? Make your choice because the comments had a number of good points that might sway you. Let's take a look. No Amount said, sounds like the owners are the cruel ones keeping their dogs outside all day and not giving them any attention. That's why they're barking all day. Kitty replied saying, I worked in veterinary ER as a technician forever. Dogs also love getting into antifreeze. Something in it tastes sweet to them. We saw dog and sometimes cat antifreeze toxicity pretty commonly. If the owners are leaving their dogs outside 24/7 to run amok, they probably got into it themselves. Coffee Skater said, humans too. I've worked in several shops where the older mechanics would straight up taste the fluids, and they'd be delighted when it was the sweet antifreeze instead of oil. I can't make this up. Mela said, I'm hung up on the fact that despite multiple complaints to animal control, there was no proof the dead dog ever existed. Ms. Movie replied, that's what surprised me too. Was there even a dog? Or is this some elaborate scheme to get original OP in trouble? I mean, how can you possibly know a dog was poisoned by antifreeze without a vet being involved? I do know this. I don't trust anyone enough to let them poke around on my computer looking for proof of anything. I Like Big Mutt said, as a vet, I will say everyone thinks their neighbor wants to poison their dog. So far, I've not had a single case where a dog was intentionally poisoned, although I know it does happen. To confirm ethylene glycol or antifreeze toxicity, you need to do a urinalysis to look for the characteristic crystals that form. We also have a blood test that confirms the actual toxin, if done within a certain period of time, and regular blood work to see the state of the kidneys. There's no way you can just look at a dog and say that it was killed by EG. Aya Stark said if the dog did exist and died by antifreeze poisoning, the only way the owner would know that without tests is if it was their own antifreeze. Pretty sure that if the dog is real, it was their own negligence that caused the death. Someone replied, I think that original OP was confused about the number of dogs the neighbor had. Put 3 dogs in the legal filing, and the neighbors decided to claim that original OP had killed one since they only had 2. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.